Okay, welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. I will begin by sharing the slides for this presentation. These slides will be shared after. Along with additional material for you to use in your family preparation. And so I want to again introduce myself. My name is Mayra Lira, and I am an attorney with Public Counsel, and I have my colleague here with me, Sharon Cartagena, who will be answering questions as they come up. So the first thing I want to cover is I want to introduce our presentation is creating a family plan and what you should be getting together in preparation for the unfortunate incident of encountering ICE. Okay. So what we will cover today, we're going to go over the following things. We're going to talk about the first thing is going to be talking about your long-term plan. Knowing what you want to do and what you want for your children's care is so important in determining what steps you need to take. That will help you make sure to reduce the risk of having DCFS involvement. The next thing that you want to look at is the actual planning. And so we're going to go over how to go about creating that plan, meaning that we're going to break it down into a short-term plan and a long-term plan. So in the short term, we're really talking about the time right after a deportation happens. And then we're going to go over the rules that ICE has come out with recently, what you want to include in your plan, and we're going to go over a really important document called the Caregiver Affidavit. And that document really is a way that you can make sure that your children are cared for. And then after that, we're going to talk about the long-term plan. So in the event of a deportation, what's going to happen to your children, especially if they're young children, who's going to care for them, who's going to facilitate if you decide that you want them to return to your home country with you. And so that's what we will be covering today. I'd like to first take a
Mayra,
moment.
Can you put it in slideshow mode?
Oh. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. So I'm going to go ahead, and that's actually a lot easier for me. I did not know that. Thank you. Okay, so first I'd like to take a moment to really acknowledge that this is a very challenging conversation to have and something that's really challenging to plan for and to think about is, what will happen to your children in the case of a deportation. So we want to acknowledge that we know it's hard to have these conversations, to think about this very difficult thing. And so the webinar is being recorded and you will have access to it after. So if you need a moment, if you feel like you need to step away, go, grab water, do anything to care for yourself, please feel free to do so. Or even if you decide that you're not ready to listen to this information at this moment, please take the time and take care of yourself, and the information will be provided at a later time. And we also have a guidebook that we will share that really goes into detail and has the forms that you need to use in your planning. So next slide. Okay, so we want to get started with the question that we hear often, which is, if I get deported, are my children going to enter DCFS custody? And the answer to that is probably not. But the reason we're here and the reason that we're sharing this information is to try to make the best effort to ensure that that doesn't happen. And so what we want to talk about today is that in making sure that you're getting your things together, making sure you're picking a person, you're hopefully increasing your chances of avoiding encountering DCFS for your children. And so, as I mentioned earlier, when we're looking and thinking about the planning and how you're going to go about deciding making this really big decision on how your children are going to be cared for and who's going to care for your children, the first thing that we want you to think about is think about what's your long-term plan with the care of when it comes to the care of your children. So is your plan for the children to join you in your home country and to go there with you, or is your plan for them to stay in the United States? And I know that right now I'm telling you that this long-term plan, your long-term goal is important and that that's going to inform everything, but it's also okay not to know the exact plan. And we're going to give you information so that you can plan for both if you're still unsure what your long-term goal is. If you want your kids to follow you, or if you want your kids to remain in the United States with someone else. Okay. So when you're planning, we'd like to sort of break it down to make it more accessible into 2 steps. One, we want you to focus on the short-term goals and the short-term plan of who can be there immediately to take care of your kids. So say in the event that the deportation happens and you're detained, in that immediate moment, who can come and pick up your children, who can go if they happen to be at school or in daycare, who can go and pick them up there, who can be available to house them. You want to think about those kinds of questions when thinking of the short-term plan. And then the long-term plan is really the plan that is going to solidify their care, right? Are you going to try to figure out how to get them to your home country, or are you going to have them remain in the United States with a trusted adult? Okay. So now I'm going to dive in more into like the short-term plan. And, like I said, the short term is right after someone is detained by ICE. So what's going to happen in those immediate moments? Something that we'd like to talk about is now with going into public spaces, sometimes, we run the risk of encountering ICE, as we saw and keep seeing on the news. ICE is in a lot of places and in a lot of public places. And so we want, to the extent that it's possible, for you to think about when you bring your children to spaces with you, to figure out if it's possible not to have them in spaces with you all the time, because it might be easier for you to, it might be very traumatic for them to see you be detained if that were to happen. So to the extent that you can, maybe avoiding having your children follow you into public spaces. And so in thinking of the short-term plan, the reason we think this is important and why we think it matters to have someone who can be ready immediately to pick up your children is that ICE recently on July 2nd released some new guidance. And in that guidance, ICE is saying that they might not allow time for parents to go. Oh, sorry about that. They might not allow time for parents to make arrangements for the care of their children. They might not even make time for you to get travel arrangements for your children in advance of a removal. And they might not help with facilitating leaving your younger children with maybe possibly some adult children or someone else who are US citizens or someone just in the care. So ICE, if they're following their policies, you might end up having, a higher likelihood of having your kids encounter DCFS or law enforcement, because that's who they might call in this situation. And so then the next thing that we want to talk about, so as you're getting that together, is like, how do you put your plan together and what is important about the plan? So to get your plan in place, you want to make sure that you're talking to potential caregivers and people that, you might designate as being available to take care of your children. Let them know what that entails, what your expectations are. Do you have a certain, criteria? Do your kids have some certain special needs? You want to make sure that they're aware of that. You also want to talk to your kids. You want to make sure that your kids know that there is a plan in place. This is a really high anxiety moment for a lot of us, and especially for kids. They are aware about what's going on, and so it's best for you to talk to them and try to ease some of those concerns by telling them, this is a plan that we have as a family, and this is who will be there to step in if something were to happen. We hope that it doesn't happen to your family, but making sure that the kids understand that an adult will be there available for them is key to making sure that your kids know that they will be taken care of, regardless of what happens. And then the last thing is like making sure that you gather all your vital documents, that you have them in one place and somewhere where someone would know where to access them, right? Like you don't want to put them somewhere where, say, your potential caregiver, the person that you're designating, that they won't be able to find them. You want to make sure that that person knows, maybe even depending on the age of your children, that your children know where those documents are. And the important documents would be like school records, medical records, any certified copies of birth certificates, passports. It's important to try to get them now, especially if you foresee them traveling to visit or to go with you. And then the caregiver's affidavit, which we'll get into more detail in a bit. And then the last thing is you want to make sure that you're informing the people that are taking care of your kids about the plan. So the school, the daycare providers, or your neighbors, so that they know and they can support as well. If you haven't updated your children's, I know we're at the beginning of school and a lot of us are updating our emergency contacts for our kids, but if you haven't done that and you're not including the designated caregiver, make sure that that person is included on there and make sure that their phone number is current, all their information, so that in the unfortunate situation that you encounter ICE and you are detained, that person is able to pick up your kids. Because if you don't have them as an emergency contact in school and daycare documents, they might not be able to pick them up. Okay. And here's the slide in Spanish. I'm going to go ahead and leave it just a little bit. But like I said, these documents, this presentation and additional documents will be shared in the future so that you have access to them. Okay, and so here we have a list of those documents that I just went over: school and medical records. Vaccination records are really important because those are, the things that we use for school enrollment, and then also just so that if the caregiver needs to have any vaccinations done for your kid, that they have that. Vital records, like birth certificates and social security cards. It's important that you go and get certified copies of the birth certificate. Sometimes copies don't suffice. And then passports. It's important that you get the passport ready for your kids, especially if you plan to have them travel with you. And if your kid has another parent on the birth certificate, it's also important that you get the correct forms to allow you to get to obtain the passport in case that other parent's not available to sign. And so we have specific forms highlighted on this slide that you can use if you encounter certain issues with regard to obtaining a passport. One important thing about a passport, and the reason we advise on getting one if you have the possibility of getting it, is that when it's the first time that you're obtaining a passport, you have to go in person, and it's hard to get if the parent is out of the country. And then the last thing is the caregiver affidavit, which I will get into in a second. So the caregiver affidavit. So the caregiver affidavit is a legal document that was created by California law. And this document allows most relative caregivers the ability to make certain educational decisions and medical decisions for a child. It also grants some rights to non-relative caregivers, but those are more limited. Those include school enrollment and medical decisions when an incident happens at school. And so what's important to know is that the caregiver affidavit doesn't, at the moment, this is an evolving area of law, but at the moment it doesn't allow for enrolling in daycare, obtaining a passport, or it doesn't transfer like the actual legal custody of your child to someone else, and it doesn't necessarily allow for travel internationally. Okay, and so here is an example of what the caregiver affidavit looks like. We will have copies again in the material for you to access and look at, but what's important to know about the caregiver affidavit is that it does not need to be a notarized document. You don't need an official sign from a judge or a court. It doesn't require even a parent's signature. It just simply is an acknowledgement from the caregiver that they are going to be the ones caring for your child. And then this document should suffice, what we said, for things like school enrollment, and certain medical decisions. And so this is a really important tool when it comes to especially short-term planning for your kid, because they can make those decisions while you figure out that long-term plan. And I want to take a moment to make a distinction between the caregiver affidavit, which is this document that I just went over, and it's something that's in California law, and another document, which a lot of people may have heard of, is the power of attorney. The power of attorney is not a legal document in California that would actually transfer custody or have any legal enforcement in our state. What that means is that if you should not pay and you should not get a notarized power of attorney when it comes to the care of your kids. You can, however, get a power of attorney for certain things like when it comes to, like, taking care of paying for a car, or handling of the car, or handling other things like bank accounts, and anything like that, your leases, things like that. But that's beyond the scope of this. Just know, we want to make the distinction that there's the caregiver affidavit, which is something in California law, and there's a power of attorney, which in California you would only use for those types of situations. Okay, so then I'd like to now move us on to the long-term plan and what that means for you and what your options are. And so for the long-term plan, again, we are talking about whether you're reuniting, you're deciding that reunification is going to be what you want to do, or if you're wanting your child to remain in the United States. So first, I'm going to talk about how you go about reunifying and what you need to do if the reunification in your home country is your long-term goal. And so things that you want to think about are, if you have family law orders at this point, it's really important that you connect with the family law attorney so that you can figure out if travel is going to be a possibility. There are different, way more complicated things that go into family law than what we're going to cover today. So it's important that you get the right information and that you understand your specific situation on what the family law implications, if you happen to have a family law order, would have on your particular case. The other note that I'd like to make, if reunification is your goal in your home country, is that you don't want to consent to a guardianship. I'm going to talk a little bit more about legal guardianships in California. But if your goal is for your child to travel to your home country and reunite there, then you don't want to consent to a legal guardianship, because that is something that suspends your rights and would create additional legal barriers for you to join with your child in your country of origin. Other things that you want to consider is that's the importance of the short-term plan. Who's going to care for your kids while everything is arranged? Sometimes travel is not, as quick as we would want. You have to go make sure that you have the travel arrangements in order, have people who are going to travel with your kids in order. You have to have a lot of things kind of set up before the travel happens. So in the meantime, during that period, who would be available to take care of your kids? So that's another thing to consider. And then, especially if your kids are a lot younger, who can travel with them, who can go to the country, how is that going to be financed? And how are you going to make sure that happens? And then lastly is the documents that you want to get in order now. You want to make sure that you have a travel consent letter and a passport available for them. Okay, and here's the slide again in Spanish. I'm going to go ahead and leave it up a second so that you can make sure to take a look and have that information available for you. Okay. So as I briefly previewed, if you have family law custody orders in place, or if you have a child, if your child's other parent is involved, one of the things that you will want to figure out is what to do if the other parent doesn't agree. Well, if the other parent doesn't agree, you might want to start making planning now about going to the court and asking for permission so that your kids are able to travel with you in the future if that were to, to happen. Okay. And again, here's a slide in Spanish for your view so that you can take a moment and get that information. Okay, so then what if the plan is for your child to remain in the United States? And so if the plan is for the child to remain in the United States, then what you will have to do is consider sort of what are the potential options for you to have someone else care for your child. And so, as I mentioned before, the caregiver affidavit is something that gives a lot of, or has, options on that allows the person to take care of your kid in certain situations. But maybe if you're thinking something more long-term, your children are young and, they're going to stay with another person more long-term until they turn 18 or something like that, then you might want to think about a probate guardianship. And here, a probate guardianship is a legal transfer of the custody. And so when you have a probate guardianship, what that means is that your rights are sort of suspended, paused while the legal guardianship is going on. And so this is a big decision that you should really consider. You should make sure that you have all the information available before you decide whether you are going to move forward with it or not. And so we just want to highlight one, that this is something that's a possibility. Two, that if you are deciding that this is going to be the option that you pursue, that it's not something that you can set up beforehand, that you can do a document called a nomination of a guardian, and to say that you're choosing someone, like say, for example, you're a designated caregiver, but the court may not necessarily follow that. They can take that into consideration, but they can, the court ultimately can decide to not approve it if they find, after they investigate, that they don't think that's a good decision. So here is the slide again in Spanish. Okay, and then here is a sample of the nomination of guardian. Again, you can fill out this section saying that you are choosing someone that you would want to be the guardian. But as I said before, it's not necessarily a done deal that they will be the actual guardian. The court could decide that that's not who they're going to move forward with. Okay. And again, similar to the situation about when the plan is for your children to go to your home country with you, or whether you're deciding for them to stay, if they have another parent that's involved. Another thing that you're going to have to consider is whether what to do if the other parent of your child is not in agreement with who you nominate for the guardianship. So just know that again, it's important that you speak with an attorney in this situation, and that that if you are pursuing guardianship as a possibility, that in order for a guardianship to be granted, the court will have to notify, or the person who's asking for the guardianship will have to notify both parents, and so that other parent will have the would get notice that the guardianship is moving forward. And you wouldn't just be able to decide on your own that you're moving forward with the guardianship, and that the person that you're choosing is the one that your child is going to go with, without consideration to the other parents' rights. Okay. And then lastly, we want to cover, we know that, and there are moments when your child is also undocumented. And so in those situations, we still ask you to think about creating a plan for them. ICE has taken young children, but they also have not. And so it's important that you also have a plan in place for them, that both a formal and informal plan in place that allows for someone to care for them in the situation that they are not detained, but that you might be. Um, oops. Okay. And so then that concludes our presentation. I am going to now open it up for questions, if there are any questions.
And if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the Q&A box. I don't think we can unmute folks. So far we have no questions, and we have a relatively small audience, so I'm not sure if we're going to get any. We do have our phone number down at the bottom there, and we'll be sending out some other materials that we've developed to help people create their plans. If you are having trouble creating a caregiver's affidavit, or have questions about legal guardianship, or about the more complicated reuniting in your country of origin when you have family law orders, please feel free to give us a call. We can't take every case, but we certainly can give advice in some cases. And please check out our materials, which we'll send around. Well, thank you everyone for your time, and I think we will end the webinar.